Hollywood once went off the rails. Before the censors slammed the brakes in 1934, American films dared to be raw, wild, and shockingly bold. They showed things people whispered about but never expected to see on screen. Some movies were banned, chopped to pieces, or locked away for decades. But what exactly made them vanish from the spotlight? Let's dig into 15 films so scandalous they practically rewrote the rulebook of cinema. Babyface, 1933. Barbara Stanwyck wasn't just acting in Babyface, she was detonating a bomb under Hollywood's polished image. The film follows her as Lily Powers, a woman clawing her way out of poverty with ruthless determination. Instead of bowing to her circumstances, she uses charm and ambition to climb the corporate ladder, one rung at a time. Each promotion coincides with a change in her life, and the message was unmistakable. Women could take control. But audiences in 1933 weren't used to this kind of blunt storytelling. The film was immediately flagged by censors who declared it dangerous for public morals. They demanded cuts, rewrites, and softened dialogue. What was originally a sharp commentary on class, gender, and power was reshaped into something far tamer. For decades, only the censored version circulated, leaving film historians with a diluted glimpse of its real fire. Then, in 2004, the uncut negative resurfaced in the Library of Congress. Suddenly, the world saw what Depression-era audiences weren't allowed to. Lily's unapologetic rise, her defiance of double standards, and her refusal to play nice. Watching it now, it feels modern, biting, and almost too bold for its time. No wonder censors scrambled to bury it. The rediscovered Babyface proves one thing: truth in storytelling can't stay hidden forever. Red-Headed Woman, 1932. Jean Harlow's platinum hair and wicked grin were enough to set movie screens on fire. But in Red-Headed Woman, she did something more dangerous. She played Lil Andrews, a secretary who had no shame about targeting her married boss. This wasn't the sweet girl-next-door image Hollywood liked to market. Lil was bold, conniving, and proud of it. The film was adapted from a novel that was already infamous, and MGM leaned into its scandalous reputation. Harlow's character schemes her way into high society, tossing aside convention with every smirk. Audiences weren't used to seeing a female lead so unapologetically self-serving. She wasn't punished for her ambition in the way Hollywood would later insist upon. Instead, she was magnetic, irresistible, and even funny. But not everyone was laughing. Red-Headed Woman was banned in several states, with censors insisting it glorified dishonorable behavior. The irony? Bans only made it more sought after. Bootleg copies and whispered showings helped keep its reputation alive. For years, though, it was remembered more as a cultural controversy than a film. When it resurfaced for reappraisal, critics praised Harlow's comic timing and the film's fearless energy. Today, it feels like a satire ahead of its time, mocking hypocrisy while giving audiences a lead who wouldn't be boxed in. It's no exaggeration to say Red-Headed Woman was one of the nails in the coffin that made Hollywood clamp down harder. The Story of Temple Drake, 1933. Few films rattled audiences more than The Story of Temple Drake. Based on William Faulkner's novel Sanctuary, the movie follows Temple, a young woman from a prominent family who spirals into a nightmare after falling into the company of criminals. The story was brutal, the imagery shocking, and the implications hit far too close for comfort in conservative circles. Censors quickly condemned it, labeling it unfit for mass audiences. Paramount's gamble backfired when the film became a lightning rod for criticism. Its frank portrayal of crime, corruption, and moral collapse fueled arguments that Hollywood needed a stricter set of rules. For decades, it was effectively buried, its reputation whispered about but rarely seen. Film historians point to Temple Drake as one of the tipping points that convinced studio heads to enforce the production code in full force. Its disappearance only added to its myth. When rediscovered, it shocked modern viewers who expected something tame. Instead, they found a film brimming with atmosphere, shadows, and a fearless performance by Miriam Hopkins. Watching it now, Temple Drake feels almost like an early noir, full of dread and moral ambiguity. Its suppression says less about its quality and more about how powerful its story was. Hollywood couldn't handle the mirror it held up, so they shoved it into the dark. The fact it's available now is nothing short of cinematic justice. The Sin of Nora Moran, 1933. Few films mix pulp energy with surreal artistry like The Sin of Nora Moran. At first glance, it looks like another melodrama of a woman trapped by her past. But director Phil Goldstone took it further, using dreamlike sequences, overlapping images, and dizzying editing to tell the story of a woman facing execution for a crime she may not have committed. The film's experimental style unsettled audiences. Its use of flashbacks within flashbacks, hazy fantasies, and moral ambiguity made it one of the strangest studio films of its era. Add in a protagonist whose choices didn't align with tidy Hollywood morals, and you had a recipe for censorship. Critics dismissed it as lurid, and for decades it vanished from circulation. Yet buried beneath the scandal was a film ahead of its time. Modern viewers see echoes of noir, surrealism, even later art cinema. The central performance by Zita Johann, best known for The Mummy, is haunting as she shifts between despair, defiance, and resignation. When rediscovered, Nora Moran revealed itself as more than just scandal bait. It was a daring experiment that proved Hollywood's 1930s output wasn't all formulaic gloss. It dared to tell a story where resolution didn't come neatly packaged, and that made it dangerous. Forgotten for decades, it's now rightly recognized as one of the strangest, boldest artifacts of the pre-code era. Safe in Hell, 1931. Dorothy McHale's Safe in Hell doesn't just flirt with danger, it jumps headfirst into it. She plays Gilda, a woman on the run after a deadly confrontation in New Orleans. She escapes to a remote Caribbean island, only to find herself in a hotel crawling with criminals, fugitives, and predators. The walls practically sweat menace. What made this film so notorious wasn't just the setting, it was the sheer gall to center a woman who wasn't the saintly type. Gilda is defiant, flawed, and desperate to survive in a world stacked against her. The atmosphere is claustrophobic, with every man circling like a shark. By the final act, the story hits with a force that left audiences shaken. Censors loathed it. They declared it indecent and corrupting, pushing it onto banned lists in several states. For decades, the movie was practically invisible outside collector circles. When it resurfaced, film buffs realized it wasn't just lurid pulp, it was a razor-sharp survival story wrapped in Warner Bros. Grit. Safe in Hell feels like an early noir, full of smoky rooms, corrupt men, and a woman trapped by circumstance. McHale's performance smolders with resilience, making it one of the most daring portrayals of the early 30s. Its disappearance says less about its quality and more about how much it scared the establishment. Night Nurse, 1931, Barbara Stanwyck's second scandalous appearance on Our List proves she was built for the pre-code era. In Night Nurse, she plays Laura, a trainee nurse uncovering child neglect and corruption in a wealthy household. On the surface, it's a medical melodrama. Underneath, it's a stinging critique of privilege, greed, and unchecked cruelty. The shock comes not only from the story, but from its brutal frankness. Stanwyck's character uncovers children being deliberately starved by a sadistic chauffeur played by a young Clark Gable. The tension escalates with scenes that censors found far too intense for general audiences. Add in moments where the nurses' private lives are portrayed with unusual honesty, and you had a powder keg. State boards banned or slashed it to pieces, calling it unfit for respectable moviegoers. For years, only watered-down prints floated around, muting its sting. But rediscovery has shown Night Nurse for what it really was, a biting drama that dared to blend social critique with raw suspense. Watching it today, the film feels almost modern in its themes. Corruption hiding behind wealth, women fighting to protect the powerless. These aren't dated ideas. Night Nurse proves that the early 1930s weren't just wild, they were daring enough to expose truths society preferred to ignore. 3 on a Match, 1932. If you want a film that captures the chaotic energy of the Depression, look no further than 3 on a Match. This Warner Bros. Drama follows 3 childhood friends, played by Joan Blondell, Ann Dvorak, and a young Bette Davis, as their adult lives veer in wildly different directions. The scandal comes from Dvorak's character, who abandons her family, falls into reckless living, and spirals into a grim end involving kidnapping and crime. The movie doesn't flinch in showing her downfall, and it layers in shocking material, addiction, neglect, and children in peril. For 1932, this was dynamite. Censors erupted. They declared the film immoral and dangerous, particularly because of its portrayal of reckless motherhood. For decades, it remained one of those titles film buffs whispered about but couldn't easily find. When reappraised, it revealed a film pulsing with Warner Bros.' trademark urgency, gritty city streets, desperate characters, and dialogue that crackles with realism. What makes 3 on a Match unforgettable isn't just its scandal factor. It's the way it weaves social commentary into a lightning-fast runtime, showing how one bad choice can ripple through entire lives. The film's disappearance only boosted its reputation as a forbidden artifact. Seeing it today, it's both a time capsule and a shocker. Call Her Savage, 1932. Clara Bow's last major screen role wasn't just a movie, it was an explosion. In Call Her Savage, she plays Nessa Springer, a headstrong socialite with a fiery temper and a streak of chaos. The film gallops through scandal after scandal, including reckless affairs, family revelations, and a jaw-dropping subplot that had audiences reeling. Bow, already labeled the it girl of the 1920s, had battled press scrutiny and studio pressures. This film was her defiant farewell, and she threw herself into it with unrestrained energy. Critics were shocked by how far it went, describing it as reckless, shameless, and indecent. Audiences, of course, couldn't look away. The backlash was swift. Some states refused to screen it at all, while others hacked it into a shell of its former self. For years, it slipped into obscurity, its reputation overshadowing the film itself. Rediscovered prints revealed a story that's messy, wild, and unforgettable, exactly like Bow herself. Call Her Savage isn't just a scandalous film, it's a statement. Bow wasn't going quietly. She left Hollywood the same way she entered it, kicking down the doors. Scarface, 1932. Howard Hawks' Scarface wasn't just a gangster movie, it was the gangster movie. Starring Paul Mooney as Tony Camonte, it charted the rise and fall of a crime lord in a city that looked suspiciously like Chicago. The violence, corruption, and audacity were unlike anything audiences had seen before. Censors hated it. They demanded the ending be reshot to punish the main character, insisted on changes to dialogue, and even tried to block its release outright. The original cut vanished into vaults, with only altered versions circulating for decades. It became a prime example of how censorship gutted a film's original vision. But even censored, Scarface was explosive. Its machine gun shootouts, moral ambiguity, and unflinching view of organized crime pushed cinema to a new frontier. It scandalized critics, thrilled audiences, and terrified censors. The very things that made it controversial are the same reasons it's hailed as a masterpiece today. When the original cut resurfaced, the difference was staggering. Hawks's version was rawer, faster, and more ruthless than the censored release. The film proved so influential that decades later, Brian De Palma and Al Pacino revived the title for their own era, and even then, censors fought it again. The legacy of Scarface is simple. You can try to bury a story, but if it's powerful enough, it will find its way back. Female, 1933. If you think Hollywood only recently discovered the idea of a woman running the show, think again. Female stars Ruth Chatterton as Allison Drake, the head of a booming automobile company. She's smart, commanding, and here's the kicker. She treats her male employees the way male executives were shown treating women in countless films. She invites them into her home, enjoys their company, and then sends them away without a second thought. Audiences in 1933 had never seen anything like it. A woman not only holding power in business, but unapologetically using her personal life to her advantage? That was dynamite. Critics were split. Some praised the freshness. Others called it indecent. Censors loathed the gender reversal and worried it might inspire women in the real world to push boundaries. By the time the production code slammed down in 1934, female was quietly shelved, chopped, and largely forgotten. For decades it was viewed as a curiosity at best. But when restored and re-examined, it revealed a bold story that mocked double standards while giving Chatterton a role decades ahead of its time. Today, female plays like a daring satire, one that proves pre-code Hollywood wasn't afraid to flip the script. Its disappearance was no accident. It was too sharp, too pointed, and far too modern for censors to tolerate. Blonde Venus, 1932. Marlene Dietrich was already a star when she made Blonde Venus, but this film cemented her as one of the most magnetic and controversial figures in Hollywood. She plays Helen Faraday, a devoted wife forced into performing at nightclubs to support her family. Along the way, she becomes entangled with a wealthy benefactor, and the story spirals into a storm of temptation, sacrifice, and reinvention. What sent censors into a frenzy wasn't just the nightclub sequences or Dietrich's charisma. It was the way the film blurred lines between duty and desire, showing a woman making choices that didn't fit the Hollywood mold. Add in scenes of smoky cabaret glamour, and you had a film that critics called too suggestive, too dangerous, too European in style. For decades, Blonde Venus was pushed aside, its reputation tied to controversy rather than its artistry. When it resurfaced in the latter half of the century, audiences rediscovered a lush, atmospheric story with one of Dietrich's most haunting performances. The film's survival is proof that scandal doesn't erase brilliance. Dietrich's presence is as captivating today as it was in 1932, and Blonde Venus remains one of the clearest examples of how pre-code Hollywood dared to challenge expectations. Island of Lost Souls, 1932. Few films from the early 1930s still feel unsettling today, but Island of Lost Souls more than earns that title. Adapted from H.G. Wells' The Island of Dr. Moreau, it stars Charles Laughton as a scientist performing grotesque experiments on animals, turning them into human hybrids. The film's atmosphere is thick with dread, its visuals eerie and unforgettable. Audiences recoiled. Critics condemned it as horrifying and indecent, while censors in the United Kingdom went even further. They banned it outright. For decades, Island of Lost Souls was nearly impossible to see outside of rare screenings. Its mixture of science gone wrong and primal terror was considered too extreme. When rediscovered and restored, viewers were stunned. Not only was it one of the earliest true horror films of American cinema, but it also carried themes that resonated far beyond its era: fear of unchecked science, loss of humanity, and questions of power. Today, Island of Lost Souls is recognized as a horror classic, but its disappearance for decades shows just how rattled censors were by its grotesque imagination. Sometimes the scariest thing isn't the monster on screen, but the people determined to keep you from seeing it. Murders in the Zoo, 1933. How shocking could a 1933 movie really be? If you've seen Murders in the Zoo, you already know the answer. Very. This Paramount thriller begins with one of the most infamous openings of the era, a jealous husband sewing his rival's lips shut. Yes, in full view. Audiences gasped, and censors immediately took note. The rest of the film is no less unsettling. Lionel Atwill plays the wealthy husband whose jealousy spirals into acts of cruelty, often using exotic animals as weapons. Snakes, big cats, and cages aren't just background props. They're part of the terror. For an audience that expected glossy melodramas or light comedies, This was a brutal wake-up call. Censorship boards condemned it, and the film largely vanished from circulation after the code came down. For decades, it existed only in hushed stories from people who claimed to have seen it. When restored versions reappeared, modern audiences discovered a chilling mix of pulp thriller and animal horror that feels startling even by today's standards. Murders in the Zoo shows just how far pre-code Hollywood could push when studios were willing to gamble on audience shock. It disappeared for a reason. It dared to go places mainstream film wouldn't dare revisit for decades. Employee's Entrance, 1933. Few pre-code films captured the ruthlessness of business life like Employee's Entrance. Warren Williams stars as Kurt Anderson, a cold, manipulative department store manager who treats employees like pawns and stops at nothing to get his way. He's charming, powerful, and utterly ruthless, the kind of character censors feared most, because he was believable. The film dives into themes of workplace exploitation, personal betrayal, and the cutthroat nature of Depression-era capitalism. Characters are chewed up and discarded by the system Anderson represents. What really scandalized critics was the unflinching portrayal of corruption in business, paired with moments that pushed beyond the moral limits of the time. State censorship boards slashed it, and when the code tightened, Employee's Entrance was buried. For years, its reputation rested on whispers of its daring content and Warren Williams' icy performance. When finally rediscovered in fuller form, audiences realized it wasn't just a scandal film, it was a raw critique of a system that valued profit over people. Watching it today, Employee's Entrance feels timeless. Its darkness isn't in monsters or gangsters, but in the familiar face of unchecked power. That's what made it too dangerous for its era, and that's why it vanished from screens for decades. So there you have it, 15 pre-code films so daring, so unfiltered, that censors scrambled to erase them from history. But history has a way of fighting back. Rediscovered reels, restored cuts, and brave performances prove these movies were never really gone. They were just waiting for us to catch up. Which of these forbidden classics would you want to watch first? Drop your pick in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more hidden Hollywood stories.